Hi friends! Today I'm going to be doing my video presentation on The True Story of the Three Little Pigs, written by Jon Scieszka, illustrated by Lane Smith, and presented by me, Katie. I hope everyone's day is going well. So we're going to first start off with the summary of The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. So it's a retelling of the classic Three Little Pigs story, but from the perspective of the Big Bad Wolf. Alexander T. Wolf, the wolf, claims he was misunderstood. The wolf explains that he was simply trying to make a cake for his dear old granny's birthday, and he recently caught a cold, which is why he huffed and puffed and blew most of the pigs' houses down. According to the wolf, the pigs were rude and wouldn't let him in when he was sick and wouldn't give him a cup of sugar when he asked, which led to his desperate actions, or rather accidental ones, of sneezing and blowing their houses down. The wolf tries to convince the reader that he is the victim, adding humor and a new twist to the classic tale. So some visual descriptions. So the illustration was by Lane Smith, and they're very playful, exaggerated, and the color palette of the story is very unique, very dreary, and very almost leaving an uncertainty with the readers when reading because of the color scheme. It's not bright, it's not vivid, it's not like how the usual stories would be told. And not only that, but I really wanted to emphasize and focus on the cover. It's a newspaper article symbolizing a sort of urgency to get his story out and to be heard. And not only that, but in one of the photos on the bottom left, it shows the pigs look mean and scary while the wolf looks meek and innocent. And the top right photo shows a bit of haziness towards the end. So that's one of the end photos or end scenes of the story. And it almost symbolizes a dream coming to an end of the wolf's story becoming less and less truthful. And it's almost symbolizing his memory of what he's telling. So the genre that I chose that fit this book was children's literature, as well as two subgenres, which was humorous fiction, fairy tale retelling, and it's considered a picture book since there is pictures. So a direct quote that I chose that really stood out to me was, "Everybody knows the story of the Three Little Pigs, or at least they think they do, but I'll let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows the real story because nobody has ever heard my side of the story." So he's sharing and forcing his perspective onto the readers prior to reading the actual book, which sets the scene and the tone for the rest of the stories, because you kind of want to hear him out, and it makes you feel a little bit more open-minded into hearing what he has to say. And when he says he's sharing a secret, he wants to establish that trust with the readers. Like, you can trust me, like, this is my side, like, nobody's even ever heard of my side, so, you know, you have to sit and listen to me kind of vent and explain and share my side and why I'm innocent. And not only that, but speaking of innocence, he claims innocence and victimization due to the lack of hearing his side. We haven't heard his story, so what is the truth to us? And that's why he really uses that to his advantage to really set a story for himself of innocence, of course. So some of the strengths I noticed in the true story of the Three Little Pigs were three. First one is humor. So the reason why I chose that as a strength is because it's an exaggeration told from the perspective of the wolf compared to the original story of the pigs, which is very comical and clever for Jon Scieszka to kind of use, because again, kind of mentioning from before, we haven't really heard from the wolf side. So hearing it or letting the readers hear from that side is almost makes us want to hear him out, since we don't really get to hear from a villain's point of view and wanting to see why they did what they did. Another strength that I saw from the true story of the Three Little Pigs was illustration. So the color scheme and dreary art makes the reader uncertain of the truth and sets the tone for the story. I mentioned this in the visual descriptions as well, but this is a strength of Jon Scieszka's overall story, because you're not too sure of the truth. If it's all bright and vivid, it will kind of paint him as a hero, which is what John Shishka doesn't want to portray him as. He's not necessarily a hero, he's just misunderstood, which is why I felt like he specifically chose, or Lane Smith specifically chose, the color of beige and brown, almost giving a vintage look, like this is a tale told so many times and washed over so many times that we never really get to hear the wolf's perspective. And the last strength that I noticed was a narrative voice. So the language and words that the wolf uses makes the reader second guess the truth at the end while keeping the readers engaged and hooked. So for example, some of the languages that he uses in this scene, when he first goes into the first house of the little pig, he says to the readers, "So I went next door to ask if I could borrow a cup of sugar. Now the guy next door was a pig, and he wasn't too bright either. He had built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind will build a house of straw?" So he's trying to connect to the readers, and he's trying to convey a sense of relatability with the readers, because who would really build their house out of straw? And he's trying to make the readers also think with him. Like, I did it, like, think about it. It's a house of straw. Like, you could have been the one to, you know, ruin it as well, because it's not durable. So I thought that was really clever as well. Moving on to the weaknesses. Some of the weaknesses I noticed was the pacing. So if you're not too sure of the original tale of the Three Little Pigs, where the pigs are branching off and each pig gets less and less patient. So the first one building their house out of hay, the second one building their house out of sticks, and the last one building his house out of bricks. So the first pig is very impatient and very sure he wants to have a house right away, so that's why he builds it out of hay, and it shows that his lack of patience and hard work really didn't pay off, because the wolf was able to blow it down. The second one, same thing, although it's a little bit more sturdier, it still ends up breaking. And the last pig, of course, taking his time and building his house made out of bricks, lasted long and showed stability, which is the overall message of the true story, or the original story of the Three Little Pigs, which is patience and hard work pays off. And the last one was complexity. If a reader does not understand the concepts of irony or humor, then the story may go over their heads and left misunderstood. So if you're not too sure of the certain languages that the wolf or John Shishkin uses for the wolf, then they may not understand if the wolf or the pigs were the victims or the wolf was a victim, vice versa. But in this story, he really wants you to know that the wolf is telling a false narrative, because he just wants to get his name cleared, although he himself is in prison. So both of these weaknesses show that a lack of understanding, or a lack of not knowing the original story, may truly fall the readers into believing the wolf's side. Moving on to age and grade level. So I chose 3rd to 5th grade level. I looked into the Common Core reading standards, which I've put here onto the slide. 3rd grade Common Core shows compare and contrast the themes, settings, and plots written by the same author about the same or similar characters. Although it wouldn't be the same authors, it's the same story being told over and over again. So I thought that it was important that they can do that with the reading standard. 4th grade Common Core reading standard, compare and contrast the treatment of similar themes, topics, opposition of good and evil, and patterns of events and stories amidst traditional literature from different cultures. So I thought that this was also very important as well. Although it's not, it's a fairy tale, I thought that it could be a good introduction into doing different cultures or different types of literature, stories, myths. And 5th grade Common Core reading standard, compare and contrast stories in the same genre, so on their approaches to similar themes and topics. So although 5th grade it's more complex, you're moving away from picture books, I thought that this can still be a good reference for 5th graders to kind of introduce the topics of a more complex series or reading. For example, picture books to chapter books. For the final activity assignment, I thought a cute and cool story would be your true story of the Three Little Pigs. So students would have to make their own retelling of the Three Little Pigs and different reasons why they went to each pig's homes. So for example, Alexander claims that he was baking a cake for his grandmother and he was looking for sugar. So that's why he went to the pigs' homes. So the teacher would take photographs of the students and create a newspaper article with their photos and their stories. So I thought it was really cute. I even made my own little activity template idea, and for an assignment that's more focused on the actual book, like the work of it, I said the students would compare and contrast the retelling story and original story of the Three Little Pigs and other stories that can be a retelling, such as Little Red Riding Hood, where the villains are sharing their side of the story. So I thought that would be really cool for students to also try as well. And that is overall my video presentation on the true story of the Three Little Pigs. I hope you guys enjoyed and have a wonderful day.